Returning home after a long day, the protagonist is met with an unexpected and gut-wrenching sight. Where their lush, carefully maintained privacy hedges once stood, there is now nothing but a barren strip of land. The vibrant greenery that once shielded their home from prying eyes, offering both beauty and solitude, has been crudely hacked away. A crisp white envelope flutters against their doorstep, catching their eye. Picking it up with growing unease, they tear it open, revealing an official letter from the Homeowners Association, HOA. The contents are infuriating. Not only have their hedges been destroyed without warning, but they have also been slapped with a staggering $750 fine for alleged rule violations. The protagonist's heart pounds with a mix of disbelief and anger. They had painstakingly ensured their hedges complied with all HOA regulations, never exceeding the strict 7-foot height restriction. How could this be happening? Who had the authority to make such a drastic decision without even consulting them first? As their grip on the letter tightens, a shadow falls over them from across the street. Looking up, they spot Diane Reynolds, a longtime neighbor notorious for her nitpicking complaints and holier-than-thou attitude. Diane's lips curl into a smug smirk before she turns away, stepping back into her perfectly manicured yard. The unspoken message is clear: she had something to do with this. Determined to get answers, the protagonist wastes no time dialing the HOA office. As the line rings, their mind races with possibilities. Could this be a mistake? A clerical error? But as soon as the receptionist answers, any lingering hope of a misunderstanding is shattered. Yes, the board voted to have the hedges removed, the woman states matter-of-factly, as if discussing a routine trash pickup. It was deemed a violation of aesthetic standards. The protagonist clenches their jaw. That's impossible. My hedges were within the height limit and fully compliant. There's a pause, then the receptionist replies in a rehearsed tone, the board has discretion to enforce regulations as they see fit. The protagonist's stomach churns. This wasn't about the hedges, this was about control. Someone had wanted those hedges gone, and the board had made it happen. But who had authorized this decision? The receptionist hesitates before admitting Karen Wilson, the board president, pushed for the vote. It passed unanimously. The protagonist's blood runs cold. Karen Wilson, the HOA's iron-fisted leader, had been behind this. And if Karen was involved, there was more to this than met the eye. Fury bubbling beneath their calm exterior, the protagonist decides this won't stand. They have one major advantage that Karen doesn't know about. Just last week, they were appointed as the HOA's new financial auditor, giving them access to years of financial records. If Karen was playing dirty, the numbers would show it. But first, they need to know who actually cut the hedges. Digging through their paperwork, they find the landscaping company's name, Elite Green Solutions. The name rings a faint bell, and a quick online search confirms their suspicion. The company is owned by Michael Wilson, none other than Karen's brother-in-law. A sinking feeling settles in their gut. This isn't just about an overzealous HOA enforcing arbitrary rules, this is corruption. A direct funneling of HOA funds into Karen's own family's pockets. And worse, the invoice for the hedge removal reveals that Elite Green Solutions charged nearly triple the standard market rate for their so-called services. The realization sends a surge of determination through the protagonist. If Karen thought they would just roll over and accept this, she was sorely mistaken. Over the next few days, the protagonist gathers more evidence, and what they find is damning. The HOA, under Karen's leadership, has been selectively enforcing rules for years. Homeowners who dared to question the board's decisions found themselves buried under sudden fines and unexpected code violations, while Karen and her allies openly flouted the same regulations with zero consequences. One neighbor had been forced to repaint their front door after Karen deemed the shade of blue too vibrant, yet her own best friend, a fellow board member, had an identical shade with no repercussions. Another resident had been fined for leaving their trash bin out an hour past pickup, but a board member's garbage had sat in the street for days without issue. The more the protagonist uncovers, the more disgusted they become. This isn't just an overbearing HOA, it's a dictatorship run by Karen and her inner circle. With every unfair fine, every backroom deal, and every selectively enforced rule, the board has been bleeding the community dry while enriching themselves. It's time for this to end. Just as the protagonist finalizes their report detailing years of financial mismanagement, an unexpected email lands in their inbox. An emergency HOA board meeting has been called. The subject line alone makes it clear what's happening: Motion to terminate financial auditor contract. Karen has caught wind of their investigation and is trying to eliminate them before they can expose the truth. But what Karen doesn't realize is that the protagonist isn't coming to this meeting alone. Word has spread through the neighborhood, and homeowners are fed up. As they step into the packed community hall, they see angry faces, tense whispers, and an undeniable sense of rebellion in the air. Karen Wilson is about to face the consequences of her corruption, and nothing will stop the truth from coming out. The community hall is buzzing with frustration as the protagonist steps inside. Rows of chairs are filled with homeowners who have had enough, people who've been unfairly fined, ignored, or manipulated by the HOA for years. At the front of the room, Karen Wilson sits tall, her sharp suit pressed to perfection, but her eyes flicker with something the protagonist has never seen before: uncertainty. Beside her are the other board members, including Diane Reynolds, who avoids making eye contact. The tension is thick as Karen taps her manicured nails against the table and clears her throat. "This meeting has been called to discuss the termination of our financial auditor," she announces, her voice carrying forced authority. "There have been concerns regarding breaches of confidentiality and inappropriate use of HOA records." The protagonist almost laughs at the irony. Before they can respond, a homeowner in the crowd stands up. "You mean because they found out your brother-in-law has been robbing us blind?" A murmur of agreement ripples through the room. Karen's jaw tightens, but she quickly regains her composure. "That is an outrageous accusation," she says smoothly. "This is about maintaining order in our community." But the crowd isn't buying it. The protagonist steps forward, holding up a thick folder. "Actually, this is about financial fraud." The room falls silent as the protagonist begins laying out the evidence. They start with the inflated invoices from Elite Green Solutions, showing how the HOA paid 3 times the normal cost for landscaping services, all of which conveniently went to Karen's brother-in-law, Michael Wilson. Gasps spread through the crowd as copies of the invoices are passed around. "This is just the beginning," the protagonist continues. "Over the last 5 years, this HOA has funneled tens of thousands of dollars to Elite Green Solutions under Karen's leadership. And that's just one of many questionable transactions." Another homeowner, an elderly man who had been fined $500 for parking his car an inch over the property line, shakes his head in disbelief. "So that's where all our money has been going," he mutters. The protagonist nods. "And let's talk about selective rule enforcement. Karen and her friends have been punishing homeowners who question them while ignoring violations by board members." They pull up photos showing clear examples: Karen's best friend's overgrown lawn, a board member's illegal shed, Diane Reynolds' unapproved fence. "How many of you have been fined for minor things while board members break the same rules?" Hands shoot up around the room, voices rising in anger. Karen tries to interrupt, but the crowd is no longer listening to her. Karen's face is flushed with frustration as she pounds a fist against the table. "This is completely inappropriate," she snaps. "This meeting was called to remove the financial auditor, not to entertain baseless accusations." But the homeowners aren't backing down. Thomas, a respected long-time resident, stands up. "Actually, Karen, I move that we vote on something else, an independent forensic audit of the HOA's finances." Cheers erupt from the crowd. Karen's eyes widen in panic. "That is not on the agenda," she protests. "You can't just—" "We can, and we will," Thomas interrupts firmly. He turns to the homeowners. "All in favor of hiring an independent auditor to investigate the HOA's financial records, raise your hand." A sea of hands shoots into the air. The decision is clear. Karen tries to argue, but the community has spoken. The forensic audit is happening. And deep down everyone, including Karen, knows what it will reveal. The meeting ends in chaos, with Karen storming out, followed closely by Diane Reynolds, who looks more nervous than ever. The protagonist watches as other board members whisper among themselves, realizing that the house of cards is about to come crashing down. The next morning, Karen takes a desperate gamble. She orders an emergency inspection of the protagonist's property, claiming a pipe issue requires immediate excavation. Within hours, a bulldozer arrives at the protagonist's home, ready to tear into their yard. But the protagonist is prepared. They've already alerted the local news, and as the bulldozer rumbles to life, news vans pull up, cameras rolling. The HOA's corruption is about to go public. Karen, caught off guard, tries to stop the cameras, but it's too late. The footage of her reckless abuse of power spreads like wildfire. Within days, the county government takes notice, launching an official investigation into the HOA's financial dealings. The fallout is swift. Within 6 weeks, the forensic audit uncovers massive financial misconduct. Karen is arrested on charges of fraud and embezzlement, and Diane Reynolds, faced with the overwhelming evidence, agrees to cooperate with authorities in exchange for leniency. Homeowners watch in satisfaction as the corrupt board crumbles, their years of unchecked power coming to an abrupt and well-deserved end. With Karen gone, a new board is elected, led by Thomas, who immediately refunds every unjust fine, including the protagonist's $750 hedge-cutting fee. For the first time in years, the community feels a sense of relief. But the protagonist's work isn't done yet. The county prosecutor expands the investigation, revealing that Karen had been pulling similar scams in other neighborhoods where she had served as a consultant. The dominoes continue to fall. And as the protagonist plants new hedges in their yard, they realize they've done more than just reclaim their privacy. They've helped restore integrity to their community. With Karen Wilson behind bars and Diane Reynolds spilling everything to authorities, the investigation into the HOA's corruption expands rapidly. The forensic audit confirms what the community already suspected. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been siphoned off through fraudulent contracts, bogus fines, and selective rule enforcement. The local news runs with the story, exposing Karen's long history of scamming homeowners in multiple neighborhoods. Reporters dig into her past, uncovering a pattern of fraudulent HOA dealings spanning over a decade. As the public outrage grows, other homeowners associations where Karen once served as a consultant come under scrutiny. Prosecutors announce that more arrests are expected as they continue to follow the money trail. Meanwhile, the residents of the protagonist's neighborhood begin the process of undoing the damage Karen left behind. Thomas, the newly elected HOA president, wastes no time in working with the community to restore transparency. One of his first acts is to invite the protagonist to join a county task force focused on preventing HOA fraud. It's a chance to take their fight beyond their neighborhood, ensuring that no other communities fall victim to corrupt leadership like Karen's. First, Diane Reynolds tries to distance herself from the scandal, portraying herself as an innocent bystander. But as investigators dig deeper, they uncover emails between her and Karen discussing ways to pressure difficult homeowners and ensure that fines generate revenue for the HOA's personal use. Faced with mounting evidence, Diane makes a choice. She turns state's witness, agreeing to testify against Karen and other involved board members in exchange for reduced charges. During a televised interview, she tearfully admits to her role in the corruption, claiming she was pressured into compliance. But the neighborhood isn't sympathetic. Many recall Diane's smug attitude when their homes were unfairly targeted, her glee when fines were handed out. While she avoids jail time, she is permanently banned from ever serving on an HOA board again and is forced to pay restitution for her role in the scam. The once smug neighbor is now a pariah, shunned by the very people she once lorded over. With the old HOA leadership dismantled, the new board gets to work correcting past wrongs. All unjust fines issued under Karen's leadership, including the protagonist's $750 hedge-cutting penalty, are refunded. But the board doesn't stop there. They implement a full review of past violations, returning money to homeowners who had been unfairly charged. For the first time in years, the HOA operates with true transparency. Monthly meetings are now open forums, where residents actually have a say in decisions. The protagonist watches as neighbors who once felt powerless now engage in shaping the community's future. The transformation is palpable. People who had once lived in fear of HOA retaliation now work together to make the neighborhood a better place. New community projects take shape, including a revitalization of public spaces. The scars left by Karen's reign are slowly healing. Determined to reclaim what was taken from them, the protagonist plants new hedges in their yard. Lush, green, and within regulation, of course. As the first leaves sprout, it becomes more than just a landscaping project. It's a symbol of resilience. The protagonist's yard, once a battleground for Karen's abuse of power, is now a testament to their victory. Neighbors walk by and smile, some even stopping to chat, a stark contrast to the tense, watchful silence that had defined the neighborhood under Karen's rule. Thomas visits one afternoon, admiring the progress. "You really shook things up," he says with a grin. "And now you're going to be shaking up HOA regulations across the county." The protagonist smirks. Someone has to. Their new role on the county task force isn't just about paperwork, it's about ensuring no HOA can exploit its residents like Karen's did. To mark the beginning of a new era, the neighborhood organizes a celebratory block party, the first in years. Laughter and conversation fill the streets as people finally relax, free from the oppressive rule of the old HOA. Families set up barbecue grills, kids run around with chalk and bubbles, and for the first time in a long while, the community feels like a real home again. But even as they celebrate, the protagonist knows their work isn't over. The expanded investigation into HOA corruption reveals that Karen wasn't the only one abusing her position. Across the county, other corrupt board members are being exposed, facing lawsuits and criminal charges. The message is clear: homeowners are done being pushed around. The protagonist raises a glass with Thomas as the party goes on. "Think they'll ever try something like this again?" he asks. The protagonist smiles. "Not on my watch." With Karen Wilson's downfall making headlines, the county takes swift action against HOA corruption. Officials announce a new task force dedicated to investigating fraudulent homeowner associations, and the protagonist is invited to be a key advisor. The task force immediately begins reviewing complaints from homeowners across the region, uncovering similar schemes in multiple neighborhoods, falsified fines, overbilled contracts, and embezzlement hidden behind vague HOA regulations. Some HOA boards resign preemptively, fearing exposure, while others dig in, hoping to outlast the scrutiny. But the protagonist knows the tide has turned. Homeowners are no longer afraid to speak out, and with state officials watching, corrupt HOA leaders can no longer operate in the shadows. As more evidence surfaces, a second wave of arrests is made, targeting Karen's associates and other fraudulent board members. The legal system moves slowly, but the message is clear: the age of unchecked HOA corruption is over. Sitting in jail, Karen refuses to believe that her empire has collapsed. She remains defiant, convinced that she can manipulate her way out of this. But when prosecutors uncover bank records linking her to hidden offshore accounts, her options dwindle. Facing a potential 20-year prison sentence, Karen does what she's always done: she tries to save herself. In a desperate bid, she agrees to name other corrupt officials in exchange for a reduced sentence. But this time, her tactics backfire. The people she betrays refuse to go down alone, providing evidence that Karen orchestrated dozens of financial schemes over the years. The result: Karen's sentence is extended, her assets are seized, and she is permanently banned from any involvement in homeowner associations or property management. She had spent years controlling people through fear and manipulation, but in the end, she was undone by her own greed. With Karen's influence finally erased, the neighborhood fully embraces its new chapter. The new HOA board, under Thomas's leadership, enforces fair and transparent policies, ensuring that all homeowners have a say in how their community is run. Monthly meetings are no longer tense, one-sided affairs but open discussions where residents feel heard. The community collectively decides to revamp neglected public spaces, starting with a community garden and a small park for families. Neighbors who once avoided each other out of fear of HOA retaliation now work together to rebuild trust. The protagonist watches with satisfaction as the changes take hold. The scars of the past won't disappear overnight, but the community is healing, not just structurally, but emotionally. One afternoon, as the protagonist tends to their newly planted hedges, a car pulls up in front of a nearby house. A young couple steps out, looking around with cautious optimism. They're potential new homeowners, unaware of the neighborhood's turbulent past. Thomas strolls over, greeting them warmly. "Thinking about moving in?" he asks. The couple nods, and the woman hesitates before asking, "We heard some stories about the HOA here. Should we be worried?" The protagonist and Thomas exchange a knowing glance. "Not anymore," the protagonist assures them with a smile. "This place went through hell, but we came out stronger. You'll be moving into a community that actually cares about its residents now." The couple relaxes, and after a quick tour, they leave looking excited rather than wary. The moment serves as a reminder: change isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about building something better. Months later, the county task force drafts new regulations designed to prevent HOA abuse, incorporating many of the protagonist's recommendations. Stricter financial oversight, clear accountability measures, and limits on board authority are set in place to protect homeowners from future corruption. The reforms gain statewide attention, inspiring similar initiatives in other regions. The protagonist, once an unwilling victim of HOA tyranny, now finds themselves at the forefront of a movement. As they sit in on a meeting discussing statewide HOA reform, they reflect on how much has changed. What started as a personal fight for justice has grown into something much bigger. No one should have to endure what their community went through, and thanks to their efforts, fewer people ever will. The story doesn't end with revenge or even victory, it ends with lasting change. And that, more than anything, is the real win. As the months pass, Karen Wilson's legal troubles only deepen. With multiple former associates turning against her in exchange for lighter sentences, her criminal empire is laid bare in court. Prosecutors reveal how she manipulated HOA bylaws to funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars into personal accounts, using fake invoices and phony maintenance projects as cover. Witness after witness describes her ruthless tactics, threatening homeowners, selectively enforcing rules, and silencing dissenters through financial intimidation. The media coverage is relentless, portraying her as the ultimate HOA villain. In a dramatic courtroom moment, a judge denies her bail, citing her extensive financial fraud and flight risk. As she's led away in cuffs, her once smug expression is replaced by quiet defeat. The community watches as justice is finally served, knowing that the woman who ruled through fear and greed will never control anyone again. Even with Karen behind bars, the county prosecutor's office continues its investigation into other HOAs linked to her. The forensic audit uncovers similar fraudulent schemes in at least 5 other communities, all of which had been under Karen's consulting influence. More arrests follow, with former HOA presidents, board members, and contractors facing charges of embezzlement and fraud. Some resign in disgrace, while others scramble to cooperate with authorities in a desperate attempt to reduce their sentences. The impact of the investigation spreads beyond the county. State legislators take notice, pushing for stricter HOA oversight laws. What began as a fight for one community's justice has sparked a movement for statewide back in the protagonist's neighborhood. The transformation is undeniable. Without Karen and her corrupt allies, fear no longer controls the homeowners. The new HOA board, led by Thomas, prioritizes fairness and transparency. Monthly meetings now encourage open discussion, and every financial decision is published for homeowners to review. One of the biggest changes is the abolition of Karen's excessive fines. Residents who were once unfairly penalized see their money refunded, while previously ignored community concerns, like broken streetlights and neglected landscaping, are finally addressed. The protagonist walks through the neighborhood, noting how things feel lighter now. People greet each other, stop to chat, and even organize small neighborhood events, things that hadn't happened under Karen's rule. It's no longer just a group of houses. It's becoming a true community again. The protagonist's work on the county task force continues to gain traction. At a public forum, they stand alongside lawmakers and other community advocates to discuss the new HOA accountability measures being proposed. The room is packed with homeowners from across the county, many sharing their own stories of HOA abuse and corruption. Some recount horror stories of being fined into financial ruin, while others describe board members who used HOA funds as their personal bank accounts. Hearing these stories reinforces why this fight matters. The protagonist speaks about their own experience, detailing how a simple hedge dispute uncovered a massive fraud scheme. The audience listens intently, and by the end, applause fills the room. It's clear that change is coming, not just for their neighborhood, but for countless others who've suffered under corrupt HOAs. 1 year after Karen's downfall, the neighborhood hosts a community celebration. The air is filled with laughter and music as families gather for a barbecue and outdoor movie night. It's a stark contrast to the fear and frustration that once ruled their lives. As the protagonist watches children run through the grass and neighbors chat freely, they realize just how much has changed. No more unfair fines. No more selective rule enforcement. No more corruption. Thomas approaches, handing them a drink. "We really did it," he says, looking out over the joyful crowd. The protagonist nods, taking in the sight of a community reborn. It started with an injustice, a hedge unlawfully destroyed, but it ended with a movement, a victory, and a legacy of reform. The protagonist smiles, knowing that whatever challenges come next, this community will never be powerless again.